Hey, everyone. Welcome back to another episode. We're Pull on the Call. I'm excited to be here. My name is Cris Rivers.
And I'm Mandy Mac.
Yes, and we are here with the incredible Emily of Pole Circle, Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Yay. Hello. It's good to be here.
Yes,
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming out and meeting with us today and letting us know a little bit more about your amazing studio and also about your pole journey.
yes.
Yeah, I'm excited to share.
Yeah.
We're excited to have you.
Yeah. I guess we should start at the very beginning with what brought you to pole dancing.
Oh, yes. So I have been pole dancing for about 11 years, and I'm from the West Coast. I grew up in California. Um, I did a bunch of different types of dance in college. I grew up doing Irish step dancing, which is like the polar opposite of pole dancing. But I really wanted to try more forms of dance and movement. So I tried a bunch of different stuff in college. I was living in LA for a little bit after college. I tried some like aerial, some like beginner silks and trapeze classes. And I was like, I want to do more of this. Like, this is really challenging and fun. I was tired of living in LA. So I moved to Portland, Oregon, just kind of like on a whim. And I was like, I'll try more aerial dance here. So I like checked out a couple different spaces. And then one day I was looking through some like weekly newspaper and it had an ad for like half off an 8-week course of pole dancing. And my thought was literally, I would never try that. Like I should go for it. And so I tried it and I disliked it. I found it really challenging the first class. I was like, this is so painful. Like, why would I try this? But I had paid for 8 classes. So I was like, I might as well keep going back. I kept going back. The owner of that studio was teaching the class. And at the end of the course, she was like, we really need a receptionist. And I was like, I really need more work. So that sounds like a great situation. At the time I was teaching, I was like a beginner teacher teaching Pilates, and I had like some work here and there I was putting together. So I was like, I would gladly take more work. So I started working the desk. Because I was working the desk, I got free classes. And I just kept pole dancing. And eventually I started teaching there. So yeah, that was my journey into pole dancing.
I love that orange. So are you still based in Oregon?
No, I'm in New York City now. I'm in Brooklyn. So
Big
um,
question, forgive me.
yeah, I was in I was in Portland, Oregon for 2 years. Um, I for some reason I even when I lived in California, I was like, I'm gonna end up in New York somehow. Like I had no real reason, but I was like, I'm gonna move to New York. And when I was in Portland and I started pole dancing, I found out that Body and Pole in Manhattan had a work study program at that time. Um, and this was about 10 years ago. And I was like, I should just apply. So I applied and I got approved. And again, like on a whim, basically without enough work to justify it, I moved to New York City. I managed to get some Pilates teaching work through a like Skype interview that I did before I moved. And I was like, perfect, like I can make this work. And I think about 2 weeks into my move here, I at first I was like, this is just going to be for a year. I'm going to do the program. I'm going to move back. About 2 weeks in, I was like, I am staying here. Like there's there's a lot more going on. Yeah, so that's how I ended up in New York City.
Thank you so
I
much for
love it.
Yeah.
I felt so stupid after the question came out. I was like, Chris, Pole Circle, Brooklyn.
Yeah. It's in the name.
Well, did you say that you did aerials before pole dance? Or
Yeah, I did for a little bit. I wouldn't say I have a extensive experience, but it definitely helped me build some upper body strength because I did not have much before I tried pole. Um, but I think once I found pole, I really loved how much it incorporated, like you were able to move on the ground and up in the air. And I think for me, that felt a lot more comfortable and like I was able to be more expressive with my movement in a way that I think I was really craving. And even now, like doing stuff aerially is not really what gets me the most excited. So I think I really loved that aspect of it. Um, I've tried here and there to get more into aerial. Um, for a little while, maybe like 6 or 7 months, I was doing aerial rope classes here in New York City, which I found really fun and really challenging. But it didn't stick.
right, I call it the wiggly pole.
Yeah. It was
I,
really counterintuitive. I was like, oh, I am not used to this like thing moving out of the way for me.
I
That's cool.
I never realized that you could do like aerial rope.
Yeah.
That sounds so fun.
Yeah. It was super fun. It was really challenging though in all kinds of new ways. Like the grip strength is super different from pole. Um, the pain is different. Like I think pole pain is unique and like on its own level, but it was like a whole different learning curve for sure.
And do you just do the aerial rope, or what other apparatus have you trained on?
That was, I'd say, the only one that I trained on, like concentrated for a short period of time. Like I have attempted some like hammock and some hoop, but again, it's like a few classes here and there, nothing that I would say I'm any kind of like have any kind of competence in.
Love it. What would you say is your pole dance style?
It's interesting. I've gotten comments from people before asking if I have a contemporary dance background, which I do not. But I guess like more contemporary style. Like I've danced in heels here and there, and I find it really fun, but it's not really my style or something that I do extensively. Yeah, I guess more contemporary style, and I really lean towards doing a lot of low flow and a lot of freestyle and just kind of dancing to music that I enjoy. And I think that's something I tell people a lot, people who are interested in pole dancing, that I think it's really, really cool to be a part of pole because it has this kind of like, as my boyfriend would say, like counterculture element to it. He's like, it's really like pole dancing is really punk rock. And I'm like, it is, because like it has these very distinct origins of coming from stripping. And because sometimes it has that stigma around it, it's not like ballet where it comes with this very distinct lineage of like, you must do it in this way. It's like you get to bring kind of whatever your experience is to the apparatus. Like pole is an apparatus, not a style. So I really love that like you get to make it whatever it is for you. And I'd say in general, at least the pole circles I've been have been very inclusive and supportive of like people figuring out their own style, which is wonderful.
I love that. It's true. Pole definitely allows so many different people of different body types, different backgrounds to be able to just express themselves, like you said, in their own style.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that about it. I think for me that was really freeing because I had this idea in my head, like if I get enough like dance skills, if I like could just like take enough, like jazz dance classes in LA or like contemporary dance classes, like maybe as an adult I'll be able to get good enough that like I can move to New York City as a dancer. And I think at like the age I was trying different dance styles, like that just wasn't going to happen, because to like get work in or like commercial work in a specific type of dance, you really need like an extensive background, or you have to fit inside of a certain box. Like you have to be good at these techniques or these styles. And something that I think was really both like challenging for me, but then eventually freeing when I started pole, was realizing that because, so many different types of people from different backgrounds and different like athletic abilities and body types come to pole, like one person might be really great at something that like I'm really terrible at, but then I might be really great at something that they just either have no interest in or can't do. And there was just like, oh, there's no like linear progression that I have to follow here. And I think at first, I'm sure a lot of us went through this, like you end up comparing yourself to everybody else. Like, I can't do this trick, or I'm not as good at, or as strong as this person. And then I realized like, oh my God, like all of us have just massively different abilities. And sometimes they overlap and sometimes they don't. And when you start, instead of comparing, like cheering people on and cheering yourself on, like that was just really, really freeing.
Thank you for sharing that. Because like you said, it happens to all of us where we ourselves. And it is freeing when you just stop comparing yourselves, understanding that all our bodies are different, everything's going to come at a different pace. And just enjoy it, have fun, like you said, cheer everybody on. I love that. Thank you.
Yeah.
right? Like getting to know your own personal body and how to use your tools.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's really awesome, like you said, to just see like what everyone's body is capable of. Like even
Mhm.
if your body can't do it, like someone else's can go into some cool shapes.
Yeah, totally.
Um, So, do you have any competition or performance experience you'd like to talk about?
Sure. I have a little bit of competition experience. It's not really where I've decided to put my focus in pole. I think because I grew up doing competitive Irish step dancing, like for a long time, I think I got a little bit burnt out on approaching things from a competitive mindset. I think it can have its benefits, like it can really teach you discipline and focus and all these other things that can be really positive, and it can also put you in a place where you become really judgmental of yourself. Um, and I'm really not into, like hierarchies. So I feel like competitions can produce like a lot of amazing skills and really push people to the next level. I feel like for me, I did best competing when I really just approached it from a mindset of I love performing, because I do really love performing, but I really don't like competing. So when I was like, this is just an opportunity for me to perform, then it worked out well. I competed a couple of times, I think twice in PSO's APC Atlantic Pole competition. And the first time I did was shortly after I moved to New York, which was about 2 years into pole dancing. And this was at a time where I still didn't want to record myself pole dancing. I was like a real latecomer to the smartphone thing, and I refused to record myself for the first 2 years that I pole danced. And I realized after that, like I was really missing out on a great tool. But I wasn't recording myself. I like didn't know how to ask for help. So I went into this competition, was changing things around last minute, like slipping off the pole. I think I still put out a performance that I was like somewhat pleased with, but it was overall like a kind of disheartening experience. Um, and then I think, when was it? It was obviously pre-pandemic, but I forget what year, maybe 2018, I did APC again. And I think I got second place in their pro division. And then I did back when, oh, what was that competition in New York City? Oh, I forget that.
USPDF.
Yes, USPDF. I think it was the last time they did it, or the second to last time they did it. I competed in one of their qualifiers and then in the competition in New York, and I got
We were
second.
there together.
Oh, nice.
I was in
I
the
got, I got
amateur, but you got
huh?
second place.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, in both of those. So my pole competition experience has been like almost exclusively second place, which is great because I I think honestly, if I had won anything, I might have felt like I should do this more, even though it's not something I really enjoy. Um, but I got to go out there and do performances that I was really happy with. And I think what I appreciated the most was when I would perform and somebody after would tell me like, oh, like I was really like moved by your dancing. Like that's my favorite thing versus like, I don't know, me hitting a trick perfectly or some judge like saying something about my technique. Like I'm way more interested in like moving an audience member.
Thank you for your honesty on that. I feel you're 100% right. When you said earlier that when it really changes the game when you start like thinking of it as I just want to perform, I just want to give a good show and have these people like not only see me but have it hit someone and touch someone.
Mhm.
And I appreciate that because I felt that this past competition, and I never understood it when people told me. So thank you so much, because I feel in the pole community like it's compete. There's not a lot of opportunities to just perform. It's always compete, compete. PSO, that's all we talk about.
Mhm. Yeah, I think there are a few students at my studio who have competed. It's not something that we really focus on. I definitely want to find ways to support people if it's something they're interested in. Um, but it's not really the route that I've gone down. Um, yeah. But when we did have a few students last year go to PSO, it was really fun to like have a rehearsal showcase at the studio and like cheer people on. I think that aspect of it, that it can really like build camaraderie and support, is really beautiful.
Right, for sure.
Yeah.
Right. I'm glad that you shared like your real comments about competing too, because and that you mentioned also like if you had placed not second, if you had placed first, you may would have been a little bit more competitive. But I
Mhm.
feel like that did happen to me. I won first place my first time I ever competed, and then I was just chasing after that. Yeah,
Really?
but you know, performing. Why are you on the stage? Are you there for like to have fun? Are you there to please the judges, or are you there to touch someone with your performance? And I
Mhm.
think that's really beautiful and an important thing to think about. Yeah. So you ended up you t started teaching out of necessity.
Mhm.
And how long did you teach? Did you teach only at Body and Pole before you opened your studio, or?
I taught at Body and Pole, I think, for about 5 years. I've been in New York for almost 10 years now. I was there for about 5 years. I went from their work study program straight into teaching. Um, and I left there about 5 years ago and was just kind of doing my own thing for a while. I taught at Incredipole in Brooklyn for a couple of years right before the pandemic started. I was teaching a couple classes there a week. Um, and the pandemic hit. I think right before the pandemic, I had this idea. I was like, I think I want to open my own studio. Like I want to open a place that like looks like I want it to look, and I treat instructors the way that I think instructors should be treated. And I just really want to have a space of my own that like gets to embody the values that I want it to. And I had the name, I had the logo, I didn't have the money. So I was like, I'll do some kind of like, Kickstarter campaign or something. And I had set up a day to do, I had recruited a bunch of friends. I was like, we're going to do a video shoot to like do this Kickstarter campaign. I had like rented a space. I had recruited the people. I had a friend that was going to do video for us. And like the day before, the space was like, we have a leak in our roof. Like you can't use this space. And my friend was also like, I can't come out from New Jersey to like video. So I was like, okay, this isn't going to happen. And then like 3 months later, the pandemic hit. I was like, well, thank goodness I didn't get anything off the ground before the pandemic. And during the pandemic, I was really lucky. I was teaching full time at a Pilates studio. And I managed to keep like most of my work and my clients going over the pandemic through that studio. And I didn't have a lot of costs because I was just like at home making dinners with my roommate all the time. So I managed to save up quite a bit of money. And then with some loans from friends, I had enough money to like start the studio in 2021. So it was kind of serendipitous. It was also still a really stressful time to be opening a studio. But I'm really glad I took the leap without really understanding how much work it would entail, because it has by far been the most stressful thing I have ever done. Yeah, I'm sure you know.
Right, I can't even imagine what it's like in New York City doing that. But that's so amazing that you were able to just like take some time and just save and then open it after. And right though, you were probably like, "Is this okay? Is this okay to open right now?"
Mhm.
And did
Yeah.
you have any time in between where you were like, "Oh, there's no students," or did students come immediately?
I mean, there was definitely like a slow growth, but we had students in the door on the first day. I think it helped that like it was at a point where some people were still really hesitant to be around others, but I think for the most part, people were excited to be around other people. And New York City still had like a mask mandate for gyms or dance studios or things like that. So we were all wearing masks. It was September of 2021. Um, I had started searching for spaces, I want to say in like February, March of 2021. And initially I was like, you know what? I'll just find like a kind of smaller space where I can rig 2 poles and I can like teach a few classes and do space rentals. And that'll be like the whole thing. And I had like a certain budget in mind. And as I started looking for spaces, I found some spaces that like weren't too much over that budget, but they were much larger. And I was like, maybe I should just do it. I should just go with the like fully fledged pole studio. And so that's what it turned into. And I opened the studio with like a dozen instructors, and we have, I think, 21 instructors now, which I think is one of the things. Certainly there's a lot of challenging things about like opening a business in New York City, but it's also great that like it's a huge city with like a large population of people that already do pole dancing. There were a lot of pole instructors here already, and I had a lot of connections, so it was pretty easy to find a team of people before even opening, where I think if I was in like a suburban place or somewhere smaller, I would have had to do a lot more of the teaching myself. And I'm really, really grateful that I didn't have to do that. And I've had to learn a lot of lessons about delegating work since opening up a studio. But yeah, it's definitely been exciting to open a business in New York City.
That's so amazing. Thank you for sharing that.
21 instructors, I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
How many
Right.
classes do you have?
I'd have to count. On the weekdays, we have like 4 to 5 classes, and on the weekends, I want to say there's about 6. So
Wow.
whatever that math adds up to, all of the instructors teach. Like some people only teach 1 class a week. Some people have, I want to say, like 3 or 4 classes on the schedule. So nobody's like teaching here full time. A lot of my instructors teach at other studios as well, or have other jobs. So it's definitely like, it's not like I have a bunch of full-time employees that I'm supporting, but it's still, I think that's something I didn't anticipate before opening, how much it would feel like such a, like the weight of the responsibility. I was like, oh my God, like I am responsible for some of people's income, and I'm responsible for like their safety and all of these other things. And I remember sitting there at the desk like the first week, because of course the first week I was doing absolutely everything. I was like, I am cleaning the space, and I am working the desk, and I am teaching. I think I had 5 or 6 of the classes on the schedule at that point. And I was like, oh my God, like I was lugging all of the towels onto my bicycle and riding them back to my apartment to do the laundry, because I was lucky, and it's rare in New York City to have laundry in your apartment, but I was glad I did, because I was like cycling the laundry over there. So it was a massive amount of responsibility. And I remember like sitting there during one class at the desk and watching the poles that were perfectly safely installed, but just being like, oh my God, what if it falls out of the ceiling? It was not going to fall out of the ceiling. It was like a safely installed like X Pole Pro. And I'm just like sitting there like, what if? And like with just waves of anxiety. I was like, I didn't know that this was going to feel so stressful. And I'm glad that feeling has changed, and I've learned a lot in the process, but ooh.
Oh my gosh, thank you for sharing that too. Like I went into it with a business partner, so we shared that. But you're right. It's like, oh my gosh, like as everything is safe, but you're responsible for their safety. You're responsible for paying everyone, like all of the things. It's just all up to you.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. And I think, like, again, I'm glad I didn't know that what it was going to entail, and I'm glad that I did it anyway. Because I think I've grown a lot. Like I've learned to communicate better. I've learned not to avoid conflict. I feel like I've been a pretty conflict avoidant person, and I'm like, oh, I'm running a business. Like if something's amiss, like I have to talk to people. I've got to let people know what's going on. If values aren't matching up, I have to stand for what the values that I made for the company are. Yeah, I've learned a lot. And that's not just in like interactions with my instructors, but like I've had challenging interactions with like contractors, doing build out for the studio and stuff like that. So it's been a massive learning experience, but I feel like more of an adult now. The kind of biggest thing going on for the studio right now is I have a wonderful part-time manager named Nicoletta, who is just an absolutely incredible person. I met her a few years back when I was teaching at Incredible, and she came to one of my low flow classes that had a pretty strong like freestyle element to it. And she's an incredible person. She ended up working the desk at Full Circle for a little bit, and then coming on as an instructor, because she has taught, she was teaching high school geometry, and she's taught in the Department of Education in New York City for a long time. I didn't realize this until I asked her, but I thought she was like in her 30s. She's like, I didn't start pole until I was 40. And I was like, oh, I had no idea. So she's just like a real adult with like a lot of life skills and just like a wonderful personality. And she teaches a really cool class at her studio now called Freestyle Flow. But she's been a part-time manager for us since January. And when she started, I was like, why didn't I ask for more help sooner? And she's been wanting to leave her job as a teacher for a while. She loves teaching, but has a lot of frustrations with the department. So I have hired her full-time. She'll be full-time by September, and she's not going back to teach at her school in the fall, which I am so excited for. And I'm really happy that I get to like offer her that opportunity. But it's also the first time that I'm like, oh my God, I'm hiring a full-time employee. Like I'm, you know, I have to take care of her health insurance and like all of these other things. I'm like, I realized I'm so excited to be able to do that for somebody. Like, it's really nerve-wracking, but I'm like, I can't believe that I get to offer somebody a job that they are really excited about. Like that's a really cool feeling.
Hell yeah.
I can imagine. I would love to go full time.
Right. We're
Yeah.
working on that.
Yeah, I think it's like, that's another thing where in New York City, I'm like, oh, there's enough people here that we can support, you know, like volume of classes where I can offer somebody a full-time job. Like, I'm sure if the operation were much smaller, I would be like, you know, it's a struggle for me to make this my full-time job. But I've been able to do that. And because we live in such a big city that has such a, like, it hasn't been a struggle to get people in the studio. Like, I've had to learn, like, okay, how can we create curriculum so that people feel really supported? How can we work on our customer service so that people want to keep coming back? So, you know, I've learned a lot about, you know, like client retention and creating programs so that people are really supported. But as far as getting people in the studio, it's been really, really easy. Like, we put some of our intro classes on ClassPass, and then honestly, people are just interested in pole dancing right now. And we live in, like, the studio's in a great neighborhood in Brooklyn. So people, you know, they see pole dancing on TV, they search pole dancing Brooklyn, and like they find us. So I'm like, oh, getting people in the good door has like thankfully not been a struggle. Cause that's what I was like, waking up in a cold sweat for 2 months before opening, being like, what if nobody shows up?
Right. It's always such a gamble. It's like, what if people don't like pole dancing today?
Mm-hmm.
But they still like pole dancing today.
It's true.
Oh my gosh. So what are do you have anything to share as far as like any of the struggles that you like came to be like maybe as a new business owner, and how you maybe found some support to help you through?
Yeah, I think, I mean, like I mentioned earlier, it's been a big lesson in learning to both ask for help and to delegate work. I still occasionally feel guilty when I ask Nicoletta, when I like add something to her plate and I'm like, oh, right, I'm like paying her, but I'm like, I could just do this myself. Like, why don't I just do it myself? But I'm like, oh no, I'm like offering something to somebody that they're excited about. And that feels really great. Yeah, I think it was helpful that I hired so many instructors right away, because it also, like, I also had that vision beforehand. I was like, I'm going to teach a bunch of classes. I'm going to know everybody who walks into the studio. And like, I'm a pretty introverted person. So I'm like, I quickly realized like, oh no, like the people that I have teaching the intro classes who have a much more like outgoing personality and are like, have the capacity to make all these connections. Like, I need those people. And like, my contribution was creating the space where they could do this. And that's a wonderful contribution. And I had to remind myself, like, it's okay that that is my contribution. And it's not necessarily like having a connection with every single person that walks in the door, but it's really valuable that I made this space. Like, I love walking into the studio and realizing that like people made like what will probably be lifelong friendships in that place. Like, I know people who found like new romantic relationships in the space. And I'm like, to me, that's just like so exciting. I also love, like, we have like a group chat on Instagram with the staff. And I love seeing people just like going back and forth, like about stuff that's not necessarily work related, but like sharing memes. I'm like, this is wonderful. I don't remember what the original question is. I tend to wander, but I hope that answered wherever we were going.
Yes, no, I love like you've built a community. It's because I also was just like a dancer and I have no business background. And I just like there's been a lot of challenges and I think it's good for us to share our challenges so that others can learn from them. I like that you also realize that you need support because I think a lot of us when we open the studio we're like, yeah, I want to do all the things, but it's good to realize other people's strengths and then put them in charge of those things so that everyone can shine.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a really just cool assortment of teachers too. Yeah, I just feel so lucky, like a bunch of different teaching styles. So it's exciting when people come into the studio. Like I feel pretty confident saying like, you will find an instructor that you really vibe with. We had a showcase in the spring that was instructors and work studies and students. So it was a whole mix of like students and staff. And just the like range of performances we had was amazing. We had a couple of students who did like a duo pole routine doing a bunch of double stuff. We had some other instructors who did more like this kind of like our instructor, Emily Campbell, they did this like ethereal kind of spin pole piece. And then another one of our instructors, Jackie, did this like performance art piece where she was like barely on the pole. She asked, our instructor Blaine was hosting the show, and I didn't realize before this, but she asked him to not give her an introduction, but to just be silent while the poles were being cleaned, and then to introduce her by screaming. And so he just let out a blood-curdling scream, and then she like strutted through the audience and was like flying at the mirror and like, oh, I forgot that my back hurts. I like can't move around right now. But she was like writhing around, like she did some stuff on the pole, but it was so cool. And I just love, like, I think that was a goal I had for the space that I didn't realize. I was like, I love that people can come here and like be themselves and do their thing, and there's space for it. And I think that's how I try to approach managing the teaching staff too, because I've been in very different, like as an instructor, very different like management scenarios. Like one where I felt like there was like instructors were being told a little bit too much, like here's what you need to be teaching, and then on the other hand having like not necessarily too much freedom, but just like not really being managed at all, which I think both of those approaches have their place. But I was like, I want to meet somewhere in the middle where I'm offering people guidance and support if they need it. And I'm like, here's what you need to be aware of when we're teaching different leveled classes, but you get to come at that level with your own style, with your own content, with your own structure, as long as it's safe for students, as long as it's, you know, following good practices, then you get to be yourself, and students I think will really appreciate that.
That's awesome.
And when you're able to be yourself, it goes back to what you said, you're able to make those connections, and hopefully lifelong friends or students.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yes.
So
yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Mandy.
No, you're good.
So you mentioned earlier that thankfully it wasn't very hard to get students in, or and it's still not hard to get students in. But I still want to ask, do you have any marketing tips that you want to give for studio owners? Do you do any marketing?
I would call the marketing initially was pretty organic. Like we had an Instagram that we were posting on, and we put our intro classes on ClassPass. So I think those were like some people who already pole danced found out about us through Instagram. Other people like found us through ClassPass or Googling pole. So I think the first kind of marketing things I did were to make sure that we had a listing on Google that was accurate, that we put ourselves on ClassPass. I think I did a little bit of Groupon, but that wasn't really helpful or effective. And that we had a website that looked good and had all the requisite information. And I'm like slowly working on improving all of those things, you know, learning about like SEO and how to optimize our website and things like that. Like I think my biggest tip for people, maybe not just in marketing, but business wise, would be to do one thing at a time. Like I think I've realized like, oh, I have this long list of things that I want to improve for the business. And it's great that I have that list. But if I try to approach everything at once, I get overwhelmed. Like I drop the ball on multiple things. So I might just be like, okay, this month, like we're going to do a little website revamp, put some more information on there, make sure like everything is up to date. And that can be the project for this month. Like I have a lot of long-term goals for the space where I want to offer more instructor continuing education and maybe eventually some kind of teacher training program that's based out of the space. I want to give our own instructors a little bit more support when it comes to curriculum. So I'm like, these are all long-term projects. But to bring it back to marketing, one thing at a time. So like we started with the Instagram, and then eventually I was like, oh, I need more systems for the Instagram. So we use Later now to like schedule out our Instagram posts and our stories. So everything's in one place, and it's much easier to just get the information out there. And I realized like, the fewer clicks people have to make, the more likely they are to show up to something. So really trying to like simplify the process there. And I kind of focused on that first. And then I was like, okay, I really need to get our like email list and email promotions like a little bit cleaner. So I've started to get more consistent there. And then I was like, you know what? I think when I send out an email blast and it has like the 12 different things happening in the next 2 months, people get overwhelmed. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to figure out how to do like a weekly thing or like a bi-weekly thing where people know here's the one thing going on that you should really know about, or here's like a couple of schedule changes. So I think simplifying things and approaching one thing at a time has been the most helpful thing for me.
Love it.
Thank you for sharing that. I am noticing I'm the same way. If I have like a huge list and try to do it all at the same time, like I drop the ball on a lot. Mm-hmm. It's refreshing to hear that other people are going through it too.
Oh yeah.
And I heard you mention ClassPass, which I've not really delved too much into it, but I'm in those like Facebook whole teacher groups where they all just like bash ClassPass. So that was one of the main reasons why I've never tried it. Yeah. But do you want to explain a little bit about what it is and like how it's helpful?
Sure. I think it might not be helpful for everyone, and I'm very clear on how we use it at the studio because I don't like ClassPass's customer service on the business side of things, because I've used ClassPass both as a client and as a business owner, and I find it to be rather frustrating. Like even setting up the account, it felt like I didn't get to be very clear on like, okay, but how much are people paying? Like how much is the studio getting? It didn't feel super clear. And like I was able to get the information after. So I do have some complaints there, but I will say that in New York City, there's so many different like fitness and wellness options. And a lot of people use ClassPass. So I knew it would be a great way to get the word out there. And I do not put anything beyond intro level on ClassPass. I know some other studios will put like other classes on there, but we don't make a lot of money from ClassPass attendees. So I'm like, this is not a way for the studio to make money. It's just a way to bring people into the studio. So I don't add anything that's like beginner one or upper level beyond intro to our schedule. Because I think it can also be an issue when people are coming from some kind of, like third party software that they might not fully read the prerequisites. So I have no interest in ever adding more, but it has been a good tool for like getting people in the door. We've had people who came in off ClassPass and who still sometimes will like take a class on ClassPass, but then they'll also purchase packages from us. We've had people who bought memberships at the studio through ClassPass. So it's been a good marketing tool in that way. But I don't think it's necessarily a good tool for every business or in every city. I think it's really dependent, on what you need.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. If you're in an area where there's a lot of different choices, then you can be in that group of choices and
Mhm.
they can select which one based on that. I know a lot of studio owners have mentioned that they use Groupon too, which I've also never used. But I also heard horror stories about Groupon, so that's why I stayed away.
Yeah, I think I used Groupon for a couple months when we opened, and again, like our business makes hardly any of the money from what people buy on Groupon. Like they already want you to make it discounted, and then you make like maybe half of what people are paying on there. And because we use Wellness Living as our scheduling platform, and because Groupon isn't really integrated with Wellness Living, it meant that like, I had to write in the Groupon description, like email us here with this information and then we'll redeem it for you. And of course, when you add extra steps like that, like people don't want to read that much information. Like if they do email you, it's the wrong number, or you just get like a phone call or email with somebody frustrated being like, I can't redeem this thing that I bought. So I was just like, this is more, yeah, we don't need to do this. It's more work than it's worth.
Good to know. Right. Because I remember too when I first started pole dancing at a studio that I came in through a Groupon. So I was like, oh,
Yeah.
right, they are good tools, but I guess you just do have to like figure out which ones are best for your specific studio and
Yeah. I
make it
think
work for you.
good things to kind of test out and see what's working.
Yeah. I remember at the beginning you said that you wanted to open your own studio so that you could have your own way. Do you want to talk about some of the differences that you've put into your studio that you might not find somewhere else?
Sure. I mean, I think what I mentioned earlier about like the different styles of management in studios, like some being like, here's what you need to teach, like exactly in each level, versus like no oversight. And I was like, I think I want to be somewhere in the middle. Like I wanted to create a studio that would be the kind of studio that I would want to work at. So I think that was a big part of it. I think it can also be challenging opening up a studio, and I was like, I want to pay people well. So I I was like, I'm going to create a base pay rate and then pay people per head after a certain number, which can be challenging as a business owner because it means our payroll, which is a huge cost, is variable every month. But I was also like, this is how I wish the payroll structure was at other spaces that I've worked, or that was actually how the payroll structure was at the Pilates studio that I was working at right before I opened the business. And I was like, this feels really fair to me. And it also incentivizes instructors to care about their attendance, even a little bit more than they might otherwise. So policies like that. I also realized that in opening the business and like setting up the payroll account, I was like, oh, if you have people on as employees, you are required to offer them paid sick leave. Like that is a law in New York State. And I was really kind of frustrated and disappointed in learning that, not because I didn't want to offer it. I was like, I want to offer this, but I had never, like, as I've only taught movement my whole life. That has been my only job. I've taught, dance, fitness, Pilates, movement things. And I had been an independent contractor in some places. I had been an employee in other places, and I had never, ever been offered paid sick leave. And I think if you've ever worked in some kind of fitness job where you're required to use your body a lot, or any kind of job where like your pay is hourly and you're not salaried, like it's really stressful. Like you go through that thing of like, I feel like absolute shit, but I feel like I have to show up for work because I need the money. And so like in opening the studio, I was like, yeah, of course. Like that's a done. Not only is it the law, but like, of course, I'm going to offer my employees paid sick leave. Like if someone's injured or sick and has to miss a couple of weeks of their class, they should get paid for that. They should get compensated like that. I think things like that, I'm like, I can't believe that I reached like this point in my career. And I never thought like, oh, why isn't that something I've been offered at any job? Yeah, so those are some of the things that I'm like, I want instructors to feel supported. And I think some instructors might care less because it's not their full-time job, but I do have some instructors that teach pole or movement full-time. And I'm like, as someone who's only ever taught movement full-time, I mean, now I do administrative work, and running a business. But as someone who was teaching movement full-time, I'm like, that's the kind of space I wanted to create for others, to feel like, oh, this is like, I understand this is a real job and you should be offered real support.
Right, like at the bare minimum of what's required too. Wow. That's shocking though. Like, I wonder if other business owners in the past like didn't know that it was required, or if they.
It's also possible that like it's something they had set up in their payroll but just didn't tell employees. Like, I also, I understand that it's really hard as a business owner to communicate absolutely everything. So it's possible that some people like weren't offering it when they should have been, and it's possible that it just wasn't communicated super clearly to employees. I think that's something I've learned a lot. I'm like, oh, over communicate. Like, if you think somebody might need to know about something, like make sure they're included on the email, even if you think it might be annoying. Yeah. And maybe somebody, from more of a business or management background would be like, of course. But I think, it can be interesting when because I've worked in so many different like studios and gyms and in different places, and dealt with so many different styles of management, that I think sometimes you notice when like somebody opens a small business and they come not from a business background, but they're just doing it because they're excited about the thing that they're offering. Like, it's really fucking hard. They might not have all of those tools or realize that certain things need to be communicated. Like, I think of some of the Pilates studios that I was working at back in Portland, Oregon, and I'm like, none of them ever offered me sick leave, but they were also like, for the most part, really small businesses that may have just like forgotten to communicate that with me,
Right. There is so much to learn as a small business owner, and a lot of times you will learn by doing, and maybe you will ask for forgiveness once you figure out that you're doing the wrong thing. But yeah, I didn't know like some states. I'll have to look into Massachusetts. I'm not sure. That's another thing. Like, I don't know.
It's
Um,
the instructors will watch or listen to this and be like, what the hell? Now I gotta find out.
I know, right? Right. Our instructors are independent contractors though, but yours are employees.
They're
So that is
employees.
different. Yeah.
Yeah, it's different in every state. I don't know, but it's just something I had to look into. There were also like, in New York, you need to have workers' comp insurance. I assume maybe that's the same in every state, but I also so I bought that insurance, and then suddenly I was getting notices from the Department of Labor that like, well, you don't have like disability insurance. And I was like, I didn't know those were different things. So there's like all these things that I'm like, well, I'm not doing this maliciously. I'm not like trying to have my instructors uncovered by insurances that I'm supposed to have. But it's like, nobody just like, there's no list of things in the correct order to do when you open up a business. So I'm like, okay, well, I have all the things I need to have now. But yeah, there's certainly a lot of learning that happens just along the way.
Right. And certainly not opening a pole studio. Like, we're like, what are you doing? I remember even when the tax assessor came in, like, she was like, I don't know how to label these poles because they're maybe structural. And
Right.
I'm like, yeah, they are.
Yeah. I mean, it's certainly nice to connect with other pole studio owners, because there are things, I mean, I was really grateful to know, obviously some other pole studio owners, but also just people who ran other movement businesses. Like the Pilates instructor that I worked for was really supportive when I was opening the business. I have a friend who runs a physical therapy office, and he was also really great. And like offering advice and connections, but there's always things that are just going to be totally unique to what you're doing. And it's like, nobody can figure it out but you.
Thank you so much for sharing that business side of things.
Yeah.
Right. But I love that you mentioned at the beginning, like that you were really glad that you did it even not knowing all of the things that were going to happen. Because sometimes you just need to go for it. And if it's in your heart and you have a vision, it's necessary.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely think it was a necessary step for me, and I'm really grateful I did it. And now I'm to the point where I'm like, oh, like I want to move us to a bigger location. Like I want to create a teacher training program out of here. So I have like big goals, but I'm also like, okay, one step at a time. Now that I know a little bit more about what it entails, I'm like, I will delegate work earlier, and I will always make sure that I have time for my own practice and training, because that's something that, like, since the studio opened has been like, some weeks I'm like, cool, I was in the studio 3 times training and I like taught 2 classes, and then suddenly I'm like, I haven't practiced for myself in over a month, and that feels not fun. So I have a better idea of like what my priorities need to be in order to like take care of myself and take care of the little baby business that I've grown.
Love it.
Yes, thank you for sharing that, especially the taking care of yourself. It's always interesting with these interviews. We learn so much. I never realized that you're paying for more than just the building, the poles. Like I didn't realize the tax successor, you needed all. I knew you needed insurance, but you're talking about 2 or 3 different insurances alone. That's just so crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's wild. And another thing that I guess I'm glad I didn't know about before opening, because I, put together my little like spreadsheet budget being like, yeah, I think that's all the costs. And now I'm like, that was not all the costs. I'm glad I didn't realize that ahead of time. Yeah, it's yeah. I mean, Mændy, it's pretty crazy.
Right. And then you're like, I got everything. And then like the music copyright people are like, hey.
Yep. Yeah, that happened to me last year. I was like, all right, one more subscription to add to the list.
There you go. You're welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I mean, we are always trying to educate people. I'm hoping we can save some future post studios some time and money.
Totally.
That is crazy. Wow.
Right. Yeah, but don't let all of that stop you from opening your studio. Definitely still open your studio, follow your dream. It is definitely 100% worth it.
Totally. Yeah. Do you, I think I've listened to one episode, but do you guys mostly interview studio owners or like a variety of people in the pole dancing world?
Ooh,
Yeah.
variety of people. And then we have just episodes with just ourselves on educational topics and health topics that need to be talked about. We've interviewed, quite a lot. Body by Fran.
Yeah, I feel like we just started doing studio owners this year. Yeah, we were like, "Ooh, let's see what everyone's studio looks like," and like,
studio.
and it's been so helpful though. Everyone's got so many different things going on. We didn't even ask you how many poles you have in your studio, which has been such a variable.
8. We have 8.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, everyone's been all over the place with that. And how high are your ceilings?
They are 13 feet ceilings. Yeah, I'm not in the studio today. I actually recently moved from Brooklyn to Harlem, so I'm at home in my little basement office, which I guess is appropriate because our studio is actually in a basement. I really, really wanted, like I had this vision before we opened. I was like, I'm going to find a second floor space. Like we don't need storefront. That's too much like liability. We don't need, but like second floor, that would be amazing. We get natural sunlight. We're like still not too far from ground level, but I just happened to find a space that was in a basement with 13-foot ceilings in like the perfect neighborhood, like easy transportation in Bed-Stuy. And I was like, this is it. And because it's a basement, because it was like 2021 and it was kind of like pandemic pricing, we got a great deal on the rent. And I was like, this is the right space. Like we'll get good lighting in here. Like it'll feel like a cool little nest for people. It's just a 1-room space where we have a little desk on the side. And then this kind of like nook that's the dressing room for people. We've got a curtain and then it's just kind of like a blank canvas with poles from there. I mean, it's got a cute little green velvet couch, which is, I love that we have that there because people love to hang out on it.
That sounds so fun. I can't wait to see it.
Yeah.
Right. I can't wait to come in person next month.
Yeah, super excited to have you there.
Yes, I definitely hope I get to take some classes. You have such amazing instructors, like all of my favorites that I follow on Instagram.
Oh.
Do you offer any online classes at all?
We do not. That was one thing I thought about right before we were opening. I was like, oh, I think we should definitely create some kind of like online programming eventually. And we might still at some point. I think especially, you know, like in the winter when it's really cold, like people, you know, might just a lot of students. I love that a lot of students who have started with us, you know, now all have their own polls at home, which is wonderful. But being able to offer online content would be great. But I realize that's like a whole other project. I'm like, if we're going to do it, I want to do it well and I want to make it efficient. So it's not something I've taken on yet. And I think it's a little further down the list of like projects I want to take on for the space. But maybe eventually.
Do you want to share some other things you have for the future?
Sure. We have you coming to visit next month, which I'm very excited for your workshop. Let's see, next weekend, one of our instructors in NICA is teaching a workshop called From the Window to the Crawl, which is like liquid motion floor workshop. And she always has the best names for her workshops. So I'm excited for that. My big project has been a project that's maybe not like as exciting for all of our students, but onboarding Nicoletta over the summer as our full-time manager. But again, that's going to free me up to work on some other big things for the studio. We've got our first student-only showcase. So our last showcase was staff and students. So our first student-only showcase. I don't know when this podcast is going out, but I realize we haven't announced this to our students yet. We're announcing it on Wednesday, so in a couple of days from when we're recording this, but we're going to put out applications for students. That's happening September 23rd, which will be right around the 2-year anniversary of the studio. So I'm really, really excited for that. Yeah, and I think I shared some of the like longer term plans I have earlier, but those are a little bit more of the kind of immediate things coming up.
Oh, that sounds so exciting. This is all your students' reminders when they watch this episode for September, your student showcase.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes. Right. I believe this episode should air next week.
Oh, amazing. Perfect timing. Applications will still be open.
Next week or the week after, one of them.
Okay.
I know. I think, yeah, it's pretty soon. Yeah.
For all my full circle students, applications are open until July 26th.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Sign up ASAP.
Write it down. As you're listening or watching this, write it down.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Let's circle back now. Like, let's full circle back.
Yeah.
Funny.
Okay. Away from the studio questions. Let's ask some
That's my favorite
questions.
What's your
Go
favorite?
for it.
What's your favorite pole trick or your pole nemesis or both?
Oh man, this is hard because I feel like I infrequently train up the pole anymore. I just love doing low flow and freestyling around the base.
Low flow tricks are fun too.
Huh?
Low flow tricks are fun too.
True. Okay. Oh, you know what I really like at the a trick at the base of the pole is like a kip up with the pole. That's one of my favorites. Love doing kip ups. Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah, I would say nemesis moves are anything that's like really like armpit grip heavy. Like when I started pole, I really hated doing the wow, I can't remember. Whatever the super basic move where you're not like doing a strong pull, but you're just with the armpit.
The figurehead or the hood ornament.
Yeah, or I mean, where like you don't have legs on the pole either.
Ooh, umbrella. I love that one.
Or the I feel like this was really popular years ago when I started, but the yogini, where you're like, yeah, just like that. I think I did it once, maybe, and I was like, this is not for me.
No armpit power.
Yeah. And then there's definitely some more like splitty, like jade variation shapes that I used to really like that I'm not sure if I can do anymore, but there's those things that I'm like learning to love the process of like losing skills and then like relearning them and being like, it's okay. I don't have to be where I was 5 years ago, but I might find like something new in this shape, or like enjoying the progression of like rebuilding a skill. So there's definitely some of the more like splitty variations that I don't remember the names of that are also fun. But I will say the kip up will still take the like top spot.
Oh my gosh, I love splitty moves too.
Up
I
in
also love that you said that your body, like, thank you for saying that. When you come back to tricks, sometimes they're not there. But we have to keep reminding ourselves that our bodies are always changing and they're always different. And we might gain muscles in different places that may prohibit us from being more flexible in other places. So thank you so much for saying that, because it is real. And it's okay to relearn the tricks. It's a journey.
this shirt. And kip up in heels or no heels?
Either, but generally no heels.
Yes.
Not me.
Heels all the way for you, Mændy.
Yeah, I still can't get my toes underneath to like go. I'm just slamming my feet off.
Oh no, yeah, that's an unpleasant feeling.
One day.
Yeah. We can practice it when you're here.
Yeah, I would love that.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah.
OMG, now I gotta plan my tour for next summer.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And then we've been asked what kind of pole grip you might use. Do you use any hand or body grip?
I will sometimes use dry hands. I don't get really sweaty palms, but sometimes the pole, especially in the winter, just feels slick, and sometimes dry hands helps. And I will occasionally use dew point in the winter, like on my thighs or arms, because I tend to have pretty dry skin. But because of that, I just pole dance a lot more in the summertime. In the winter, I just keep my sweatpants on and I roll around on the floor. And in the summer, when I'm sweaty, I stick to the pole so much better.
A seasonal pole dancer.
Totally.
Thank you for sharing that. Do you have any advice for any beginner pole dancers?
Ooh. What is my advice? I would say don't compare yourself to others, and really lean into what feels good for you. And at the same time, like, don't be afraid to challenge yourself. You are capable of so much more than you ever thought.
Love that. Thank you so much for that.
Right, that's beautiful advice.
Yes. And I sometimes I feel like we haven't asked this in a while, but what hobbies do you have besides pole dancing? Because we are all regular humans who love pole dancing. We like to do other stuff.
Yeah. Ooh. I mean, I've generally leaned towards hobbies that are really movement heavy. So like pre-pandemic, I was doing a lot of Muay Thai kickboxing, which was really fun. Lately, I've been doing a lot of Brazilian Zouk, which is a style of social partner dance, which is also really fun. And in New York City, there's like 2 to 3 socials a week in the Brazilian Zouk scene. So I like to go to at least one of those. I have a friend that I practice Zouk with every so often. So that's definitely like a hobby that I've leaned into a lot more lately. And there's a lot of different Zouk festivals that happen. So I feel like I've been starting to go to like a couple of those a year. Like the Brazilian Zouk scene is also very like late night oriented, and I am not a late night person, but because I love the dance so much, I've started to lean into it. Like when you go to a weekend festival, or like Congress as they call it, the dance socials start at 10 p.m. and go to like 7 or 8 in the morning. So at those, I've had to like, I just end up being massively sleep deprived, but it's super fun and super worth it. I think it's really like pole dance. I love that I've been seeing, I think, a little bit more of a trend in pole, especially in the kind of like freestyle or like prompt based movement of people like actually dancing with each other more and not just like doubles tricks. but dancing with partners, because pole can sometimes be like a very individual thing. Like you have your own apparatus, even if you're in a class with other people. So it's been really fun to do a style of dance where you're not the only person. And if you're learning the style of dance as a follow instead of a lead, like you really have to learn to take influence from somebody else. So that has been super fun. Other hobbies I have, I guess not a hobby, but I have a 2-year-old German Shepherd who I love so much. She's the sweetest dog. I also adopted her like right before I opened the studio, which I do not recommend to anybody. Don't adopt a puppy at the same time that you're opening a business. It's another reason I was sleep deprived. I don't regret it at all, but she was and has been a lot of work, but I love her to death. And then my boyfriend and I recently moved into an apartment in Harlem where we actually have a backyard. So I think another new hobby will be gardening. We have some like squash and cucumbers and tomatoes that he recently planted. So those I would say are my current hobbies.
I love it. Pole dancers, we are killer gardeners.
Are you a gardener?
Oh my goodness, I love it. Yes, I've started my own homestead.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yes.
So cool.
Yes, I'm not really a gardener.
You've brought in some vegetables into the studio from your garden in the past.
Those are from my partner.
Too funny.
Much better. He grows all the things. We did sprinkle some seeds outside the studio, so I did do some gardening, I guess.
That's cute.
It's so calm. It's nice to just sit there and just relax and ground yourself with the ground.
Yes.
I don't know if you could hear the barking, but that is my dog upstairs. It was faint. I think she stopped.
Yeah, no. I was like, cue the dog.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, this has been so much fun.
Yeah. Thank you so much for inviting me. This has been wonderful.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to share at all? Anything that comes to mind? Any tips or anything you want to promote? We're going to have all your links and everything in the comments below, whether they're listening or watching.
Well, my promo will be, if you're out there and you feel like visiting New York City, definitely come to Full Circle Brooklyn. We have amazing instructors. I will say, if you're out there and you happen upon this podcast and you're interested in starting pole, do it. There's amazing studios everywhere. And then I will also say, this is funny for me to say because I'm a person who's been pole dancing for like 10, 11 years and I own a studio. My partner actually, he asked me a question at some point, like, why are you passionate about pole dancing? And I told him, like, I'm not actually. To me, it's just like, it's a vehicle for things that I really care about. Like, to me, it's, I love moving. I love moving with other people. I love getting people to understand like the potential in their bodies and like movement as almost, like a metaphor for life. And so I think it is a beautiful vehicle for learning a lot of different things and experiencing a lot of different things. And so if you start pole, like, don't take pole itself too seriously. It is just like a beautiful thing that can bring a lot of things to your life. But it doesn't have to be the thing.
I love that.
Thank you for sharing that.
I know that's definitely gets you thinking.
Right. There's so many avenues that come from pole, which I didn't realize either. It kind of scoops you in. Oh, well, thank you so much again for sharing this time with us and for letting us know a little bit more about your pole journey and your studio. And I'm so excited. Thank you so much for having me teach workshops at your studio as well.
Yeah, I can't wait to meet in person.
Yeah, only I'm a little jelly, but we're gonna be okay. I'll have my time.
Yeah.
Cris, we'll have you do workshops as well.
Speaking of dogs barking, there goes my chihuahua.
More dogs.
You were on the game with workshops, like you told me like earlier this last week. Oh, I sent out my workshop things to a lot of people. I was like, holy crap, I didn't even think about that.
I finally did. I always talk about it, but finally did this time, and I'm very appreciative of everyone who's accepted me, and I'm really excited to meet everyone.
Yeah.
Yes, that actually brings up a last question,
Mhm.
real quick, because you probably have to go. Do you offer workshops? Do you travel for workshops, Emily?
I do not. I have done a few here and there in the past, but I do really love teaching, but I have made it less of a focus, like since I opened the business. And I might offer more at the future. And I think I would probably use the studio as a way to kind of develop the workshops that I really want to teach. But it's actually been really, because I've taught not just pole, but different types of movement for a long time, I think I was feeling pretty burnt out on it. So it's been really wonderful to take a step back from teaching. And teaching is like my identity. But who knows? I might again in the future, especially because I feel like I've had a little bit more time and space to practice for myself, and that might lead me in a direction where I'm like, oh, here are the things I'm practicing that I'm really excited to share with others.
I love it. Time to fill your cup so that you can fill everyone else's cup again.
Exactly.
Sharing that honestly.
We'll have to scoop you up and have you at pole in the wall
Yeah.
when you're ready.
I would love to visit.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, then I guess we should do our closing. Yeah.
Yes, I can't wait to see what the future holds for you in the studio.
Yes.
So much.
On that note, I guess we should thank you everyone for listening to or watching this podcast wherever you are. We are Pole on the Call podcast, and my name is Mændy Mac.
Position myself, and I am Lord Cris Rivers.
And I
Emily,
don't like pleasers.
Yes, that is
full
okay.
circle, Brooklyn.
Well, pole dancers
Right, we
dance.
take all different foot aesthetics.
Mhm.